Time now for finance with Michelle Rafferty. And Michelle, the local share market is up this afternoon.
That's right, Kim. The share market is slightly higher thanks to gains in the resources, energy and retail sectors. The All Ordinaries Index is up around 0.25%, as is the ASX 200. In the heavyweights, the miners are performing well. Rio Tinto's up just over 2%, while BHP's up nearly 1.5%. The banking sector is trending lower. Across the region, and the Nikkei is up around 2%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng is down. The Dow Jones Industrial Average put on 22 points, the S&P 500 added around 4.4%. Now to currencies, and at the moment the Australian dollar is just slightly down, just under that 96.5 US cents mark. And the Australian dollar has lost about 8% of its value over the last 6 weeks. Back in January, a number of business experts thought the dollar would remain above parity with the greenback. But after the rollercoaster ride of the last few weeks in the currency markets, they've changed their tune.
I now see the dollar at the end of the year around 90 cents. I think the change from where I was possibly a couple of months ago lies with the US rather than Australia. I think we are seeing signs of strength. We've heard Bernanke say that quantitative easing is going to be wound back, and it's now looking like the strength in the US economy is such, and the momentum is such, that they can probably do that around the end of the northern summer. So that will take pressure off the Australian currency further.
Well, we tend to think that the Australian dollar is going to close out the year at 95 US cents. The primary reason for this is we are seeing a much larger than expected slowdown in the Chinese economy, and obviously commodity prices are coming off, and at the same time the US economy continues to improve, and so therefore the growth relativities are becoming a bit more supportive for the US, and we expect the currency to continue its depreciation, even though we've probably seen the majority of it.
Chinese demand for commodities remains high, and this will continue through to next year, keeping the dollar high. The Australian government's focus on reducing government debt will also ensure that foreign investment into Australia remains strong. Overall, we believe that the Australian dollar will bounce back and be on par with the US by the end of this year.
Well, we've got a forecast of 98 cents. We've had that forecast for a while now, but I have to admit that there is downside risk on that forecast at the moment. One of the key drivers of currencies has been the rise in the US dollar, so the Australian dollar, like many others, has weakened, and we do see some downside risk on that forecast.
At the beginning of the year, our forecast for the Australian dollar was 107 versus the US, and in the last couple of weeks we've revised down that profile, and we now expect the Aussie to be at parity by the end of 2013. There are probably a couple of reasons behind that. The most important one is that we are not, as a house, big US dollar bulls, and that's clearly a significant part of the equation for the Australian dollar outlook. The second reason is that we're not particularly bearish on commodity prices at JP Morgan. And finally, we're also reasonably optimistic on the Chinese growth story. So we have Chinese growth both this year and next year just shy of 8%, and we think those three factors combined probably suggest some modest upside for the Australian dollar over the next 6 months.
Farmers are lobbying the federal government to block the sale of the country's biggest grain exporter to an American company. Illinois-based Archer Daniel Midlands has offered $3.4 billion for GrainCorp. The deal is awaiting regulatory approval. If it's endorsed, it will give the US company control of GrainCorp's extensive network of grain silos, ports and transport infrastructure. Farmers fear it will stifle Australia's competitiveness. And there are more signs of the sluggish nature of the domestic economy, with figures showing subdued growth in the private sector loans. Reserve Bank figures show lending to the private sector increased by just 0.3% in April. That follows a 0.2% increase in March. Annual credit growth has fallen slightly, representing the slowest pace in almost 2 years. Housing loans were the strongest component of the figures, followed by business credit and other personal loans. And Kim, that's the latest from the finance desk.
Thanks, Michelle.